Hello and welcome back to my channel. Subscribe, like and comment your thoughts on this video. Let's get the channel to 20k. So in this video I have compiled interesting videos for you guys. Trust me, this is a must watch. In this video you will hear a man explaining how Uganda escaped Zionism. The only reason that made Uganda escape from the Jews settling there is because the Jews couldn't decide whether they wanted the Holy Land or somewhere else. It is Theodor Herzl who was the mastermind behind Zionism who suggested that they should go for the Holy Land for marketing purposes. We need to get the Jews to identify with our movement, so we're going to use Jewish symbols, phrases that are familiar, concepts that are precious, and we're just going to twist them a little. Now he talks about a lot of things in this video. More reason you need to watch this video till the very end. This video also further highlights that Judaism is not a culture or ethnicity, but is only a religion, because you can convert to Judaism. Zionism was created to negate Judaism, and Zionism is created to replace Judaism, because the differences between Zionism and Judaism are vast. Check out this collection of videos for more information. I will be right back.
They couldn't even decide whether they wanted the Holy Land or somewhere else. You know, they had the Uganda plan, they had other things. And Theodor Herzl, who was the masterminds behind Zionism, he said, no, listen, guys, we want the Holy Land because, remember, this is like identity theft. He didn't use these words. I'm paraphrasing, of course. He said, for marketing purposes, we need to get the Jews to identify with our movement. So we're going to use Jewish symbols, phrases that are familiar, concepts that are precious, and we're just going to twist them a bit. Kind of.
Yeah. You know what's interesting that on this specific topic, you refer to one of the Zionists in your book who actually recommended the land of Palestine over other lands for the reason that Jews could change their socioeconomic status there. You say, for example, Jews who immigrated to America tended to remain in the same types of jobs that they had in Europe. Jews in Russia were not involved in farming or agriculture, for example. If the Jews would collectively move to Palestine, they could develop it into a comprehensive social and economic community where Jews could normalize not only their lifestyles, but also their occupations. So there was this notion that it was also not only for religious reasons, but there was this idea that Palestine would make sense from an economic perspective.
It wasn't for religious reasons at all. They wanted the Jews to get together and start a new economy wherever it was. You know, Herzl wanted, actually the Orthodox Jews, there was a small amount of Orthodox Jews, very misguided, who thought mistakenly that they could kind of exploit the Zionists, that the Zionists will help find a place where the Jews can go where there won't be any anti-Semitism, and as far as ideology and Jewish identity, the rabbis will take care of that. The Zionists presented themselves to many Jews as simply wanting a practical solution to anti-Semitism. That was propaganda. And the rabbis actually said, we don't need the Holy Land, let's take Uganda, because Rabbi Reines was their leader, that was his name. He said, because if we're just looking for a safe place, why do we have to have the Holy Land? And Herzl, who was anti-religious, he didn't like religious Jews. He said, no, we need the Holy Land because marketing purposes. We want the Jews to feel a sense of being Jewish, but not as a religion, as a nationality. We want them to have a sense of this is a familiar place, the place they've always longed for, but not as a messianic renewal of the world, as a national homeland. You see, artificial Jewish flavoring and artificial Jewish coloring, that's what they did. So it's like taking, I don't know, an apricot-flavored Jelly Belly and trying to get nutrition from it and serving it to these people that eat apricots and say, look, we got this new apricot for you. It was bait. It was a generations and generations of, it was brainwashing. Now, but here's the thing, Israel, in order for the problem in Israel to be solved, Israel has to change its identity. The problem is you cannot have a Jewish country, Jewish state the way they define a Jewish state, and also be a democracy. And if they want to retain it as a Jewish state, that's the cause of the problem. So the problem is that Israel calls itself the Jewish state. Israel is different than all other countries in the world. All other countries in the world are the countries of their citizens. I'm an ultra-Orthodox Jew. Well, that's why I haven't been in a movie theater for 50 years. And to me, Judaism, being a Jew, means one thing. Judaism is not a culture, chicken soup. I met Gilad the first time in a kosher deli on Broadway, and he sits down and he says, first thing he says is, opens the menu and he says, what's the most Jewish food? So first thing I said, there's no such thing as Jewish food because Judaism is not an ethnicity, but if you want to know which food Jews would probably eat most, order the sushi. Being Jewish is not an ethnicity. Being Jewish is not a culture. Being Jewish is not even a blood family. You can convert to Judaism. You can't convert to a blood family. You cannot convert to a race. Judaism is a religion. That's all it is. In particular, specifically, in the year 2448 after creation, God came to Moses and the Jews on Mount Sinai and gave them the Torah. No, I was wrong. That's not true. God came to a group of random people who were not a nation at all. They were not Jews, and gave them the Torah. Because they got the Torah, they also received with it a mission to fulfill God's 613 commandments in this world. The reason they got it was because God was and still is willing to give it to anybody who's willing to accept it. Those people who were there were willing to accept this job. When I give you a job, I'm also presumably giving you the tools to get the job done. God then created the Jewish people. It's not that there was a Jewish nation called the Jewish people who created the religion. No. The religion created the Jewish people. The definition of a Jewish person is somebody who is transformed by receiving the Torah. You could receive the Torah on Mount Sinai like the Jewish nation did then, or our tradition tells us that the souls of many people who are not yet born will also receive the Torah on Mount Sinai. God ensured that those people will be born. When they're born, they will have Jewish mothers. They also receive the Torah on Mount Sinai. Or, if you weren't there, neither in soul or in body, you can accept the Torah now, and you're one of the Jewish people as well. The Torah makes the Jewish people. Had God not given us the Torah, it's not that we would be the Jewish people without a Torah. Rather, we would not be the Jewish people. Had God given the Torah to another group of people, had someone else accepted it, they would be the Jewish people. Now, you don't have to accept this story that I said, but that's what religions are about. You don't have to accept my religion. But without the Torah, without Judaism, there are no Jewish people. If a person doesn't believe in this narrative that I just said, he doesn't believe that God gave the Torah to the Jews on Mount Sinai, and you don't believe that people were transformed by the Torah, then you don't believe in the Jewish people. There is no other definition of Jewish people except for those that accepted the Torah. The Zionists wanted to change the definition of Jewishness from a religion to land, language, and culture. They needed a land, that's Israel. They needed a language, so they created a new language. Ivrit, Hebrew is called. Traditionally, the Jewish people are a religion. To the Zionists, as Ben Gurion believed, religion is the national tragedy of the Jewish people. Until now, they didn't have much of an opportunity, or they didn't believe they had much of a necessity to openly assault our religion. To us, to the world, they presented us as museum pieces, like dinosaur bones. Suddenly, we become real and a threat to them, because they see that we're not giving up our religion. The same energy, the same power, the same commitment and resolve that kept us alive for 2,000 years is now being leveraged against them. And the same reason the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans could not assimilate us and make us into them, the Zionists now see they can't make us into them either. Of self-defense. It's not just a military, it's a melting pot. It's a agent of social change. The values that are taught in the Israeli army are diametrically opposed to the values of Judaism. It's an indoctrination camp. It's not just the military. That Zionism is either part of Judaism or is compatible with Judaism or is even the main part of Judaism. All of those are actually false. Zionism was created to negate Judaism. Zionism was created to replace Judaism. The differences between Zionism and Judaism are vast. They're vast and profound. The propaganda that the Zionists have churned out for the past 100 years have confused and conflated Zionism and Judaism such that when the average person walks down the street, he thinks that the state of Israel is the Jewish state, he thinks that Zionism is Judaism, and he doesn't know the difference. This group of Jews here are students of the late Satmar Rabbi Reb Yoel Teitelbaum, who was the greatest disseminator of the clarity regarding the difference between Judaism and Zionism. He understood it, he wrote a very big book about it, and he, more than anybody else, was able to communicate that to his students. It is important to review his teachings so that we can understand what our religion is about. According to Zionism, Jewish identity is political. It's national. According to Judaism, Jewish identity is completely religious. A Jew, by definition, is somebody who accepted the Jewish religion or who is defined as a Jew by the Jewish religion. According to Zionism, Jewish identity is political, and it's defined the same way we define the identity of any nationals, like a Frenchman or a Canadian. According to Judaism, Jewish identity is centered only around God and God's teachings, nothing else. According to Zionism, Jewish identity is centered around a nation state, which they randomly decided is the nation state that was created in 1948 that they call Israel. According to Judaism, a Jew is supposed to have certain character traits. He's supposed to eschew violence. He's supposed to oppose violence. He's supposed to be disgusted by violence. Even in the olden days when Jews had to defend themselves, that was considered nothing to glorify. Jews don't have military heroes. We have religious heroes. Our heroes are the righteous. Our heroes are the scholars. The heroes of the Zionists are the war heroes. The Jews have no national sites where wars took place, such as the Alamo in America. Jews are not militant. Jews are religious. Jews are, the way the Bible describes us, a nation of priests and a holy people. If people want to retain their Jewish identity, if they want to resist the propaganda that is churned out by Zionists and Zionism every day, then it is vital that they take proactive steps to defend themselves against it.
Israel in Uganda. The subject of today's history lesson happened decades ago. At the turn of the century, the nascent Zionist movement was in full swing. Anti-Semitic pogroms across Eastern Europe not only threatened the lives and livelihoods of millions of Jews, but hinted at greater violence to come. In order to escape the anti-Jewish hatred they faced, the Jewish people longed for a homeland of their own, and their friends in Great Britain had a plan. In 1903, the British offered Theodor Herzl, the father of Zionism, 5,000 square miles of land in an area called Wasan Gishu. While the plan was referred to as the Uganda scheme, the land is actually in what is present-day Kenya. Either way, the Jewish people had been promised a land of their own that was not their biblical promised land. Now, Herzl himself supported the offer as he knew it would only be a temporary spot for the Jewish people, an antechamber to the Holy Land, he called it. But many members of the World Zionist Organization, which he headed, did not agree with him. They worried that by accepting this promised land, they might not later be able to return to the actual promised land. Now, while the Zionists feared over the plan, they sent 3 members to Africa to research the area. Sound a little like Joshua and Caleb's biblical spies to anyone else, right? Now, while the area, which is high on plateau, was a temperate one, it also posed many dangers. Lions and other man-eating beasts, as well as natives who did not seem to be keen on Jewish settlers taking over part of their land. And so 2 years after, the British made the Jewish people a Ugandan offer, which they refused. it would be more than 40 years later that the Jewish people would settle in another land held by the British at the time, then mandate Palestine, which is the promised land of the Bible, fulfilling prophecy and making history. Now, this Uganda scheme was a proposal by British colonial secretary to create a Jewish homeland in a portion of British East Africa. It was presented at the 60th World Zionist Congress in 1903 by Theodor Herzl, the founder of the modern Zionist movement. He presented it as a temporary refugee for Jews to escape rising anti-Semitism in Europe, and this proposal faced opposition from both the Zionist movement and the British colony. Now, by rejecting that offer, it was clear that the Zionists preferred Palestine as a refugee for the Jews. Chamberlain realized this, as he stated in his notes, to say, if Dr. Herzl were at all inclined to transfer his efforts to East Africa, there would be no difficulty in finding land suitable for Jewish settlers. But I assume that this country is too far removed from Palestine to have any attractions for him. The historic longing for the promised land certainly motivated the Zionists, but they were also driven by the pressing need to save Jewish lives. The goal of our present endeavors must not be the Holy Land, but a land of our own. We need nothing but a large piece of land for our poor brothers, a piece of land which shall remain our property, from which no foreign master can expel us. While the need for a haven was acknowledged, the officially staged goal of Zionism, as unanimously adopted in Switzerland at the first Zionist Congress in 1897, was to create for the Jewish people a home in Palestine secured by public law. In May 1901, Herzl began meeting with the Turkish. The officially staged goal of Zionism, as unanimously adopted in Switzerland at the first Zionist Congress in 1897, was to create for the Jewish people a home in Palestine secured by public law. In May 1901, Herzl began meeting with the Turkish Sultan to help further the Zionist goal of securing Turkish Palestine. In July 1902, the Sultan finally offered to give the Jews land in Mesopotamia, Syria, and Anatolia in exchange for £2.6 million, but he did not offer Palestine. Until then, Herzl had adamantly refused to consider other options. Later in 1897, he had rejected a plan to settle Jews in Cyprus as proposed by Davis. Even later, while considering the East Africa option, Palestine was always on Herzl's mind. Having failed with the Sultan, he met with Russian leaders in July 1903 and received what turned out to be a duplicitous pledge that they would use their influence with Turkey and try to secure Palestine for the Jews. In fact, the first non-Palestine option seriously considered was El Arish, Egypt, lying adjacent to Palestine. The area was therefore not viewed as a repudiation of the ultimate goal, but rather as a temporary stepping stone to an ultimate move to Palestine. In the 1890s, Paul Friedman, a converted Jew, was deeply moved by the suffering of Russian Jews and wanted to establish a Jewish colony. So in December 1891, he had 46 people who were ready to go with him to Egypt. But within a year, the plan had disintegrated. Within the Zionist movement, however, the plan enjoyed many reincarnations. Now, Herzl's immediate response to Chamberlain's offer to present-day Kenya, as recorded in his diary, was the following: our best must be in or near Palestine. Later on, we could also settle in Uganda, for we have masses of people ready to emigrate. Let's now take a look at Judaism. Is it an ethnicity or religion? Of course, Judaism is a religion, and it is this religion that forms the central element of the Jewish culture that binds Jews together as a nation. It is the religion that defines foods as being kosher and non-kosher, and this underlies Jewish cuisine. It is the religion that sets the calendar of Jewish feasts and fast days, and it is the religion that has preserved the Hebrew language. Is Judaism an ethnicity? In short, not anymore. Although Judaism arose out of a single ethnicity in the Middle East, there have always been conversions into and out of the religion. Thus, there are those who may have been ethnically part of the original group who are no longer part of Judaism, and those of other ethnic groups who have converted into Judaism. So if you're referring to a nation in the sense of race, Judaism is not a nation. People are free to convert into Judaism. Once converted, they are considered the same as if they were born Jewish. So this is not true for a race. Now, one of the key forces in shaping the history of Palestine was the Zionist movement. This movement emerged from and is rooted in political developments in Europe, but it changed and developed as it evolved from a political movement in Europe to a settlement and nation-building project in Palestine. Thus, we need to step outside the physical context of the Middle East to understand the force that ultimately changed the Middle East. Zionism is a form of Jewish nationalism that possessed Jews are a nation and that Jews should receive national rights on the basis of this identity. What distinguishes Zionism from other forms of Jewish nationalism is that Zionists, after a brief period of uncertainty and alternative proposals, believed that the location for these rights or sovereignty should be the land of Israel, which religious Jewish tradition regarded as Jews' ancient and ultimate homeland. While Judaism is a monotheistic religion believing in one God, it is not a racial group. Individuals may also associate or identify with Judaism primarily through ethnic or cultural characteristics. Jewish communities may differ in belief, practice, politics, geography, language, and autonomy. We have finally come to the end of the video. Kindly share your thoughts or your take on this video. Thank you for watching and see you in my next video.